Okay, so my name is Justice Dazzle, and tonight I am going to try to continue / finish trauma, my series on my trauma. Yay! Because the other night I tried to get through it all, and if you watched the first one, you know, I just got to a point where I couldn't anymore. And I will preface this by saying that there is going to be some content about gaslighting and emotional manipulation, as well as heavy alcohol use, and all around dangerous situations. So, as well as loss of home by fire, and homelessness and such. So, with that, I'll get into it. So where I left off the last time was talking about that one guy that just scared me, but he liked me, enjoyed spending time with me, so I was too scared to separate myself from him. Not that long after that, I was working full time, I was doing my thing, and going into dangerous situations, and I was very suicidal, you know, not in a I'll do it myself type of situation, because I was too scared, I was not powerful enough, didn't really want to go through with it, what do you want to call it, but I put some people in some very hard situations, and unhealthy things, because, you know, I mean, obviously in the way I was living, in the dangerous situation and people and choices that I was making, death could have come at any time. I wasn't actively trying, but I wasn't trying to prevent it either. And there were a couple of instances that I was just ready. You know, the first one, there was a night where I was over at some friend's house, and one of the roommates got home, and, you know, this was in a pretty, you know, it was a town, but it was a pretty rural area, a lot of, for lack of a better term, gun-toting rednecks, and this was the group of people that I was currently hanging out at that time, and one of the roommates got home from hunting all weekend, and, he was putting his guns away in his gun safe, and I grabbed the barrel of his shotgun, and I went and I held it over my heart, and I was like, pull the trigger. And he's like, I don't know if it's loaded or not, like, I'm not positive, I haven't had a chance to go through everything, and it's like, there's just one way to find out, pull the trigger, and he was like, no, and one of the other people that was there, who was severely intoxicated and thought it was hilarious, reached over and pulled the trigger. And obviously, since the fact that I am speaking to you and I don't have a massive hole in my chest from a 12 gauge going off directly in front of my heart. There wasn't a shell in the chamber. The gun wasn't loaded. And for a very long time, I was very angry about that. I really wanted there to be, I really wanted it to be there. Because I was in just so much pain. And not that long after that, I was hanging out with some dangerous / violent people, and we were walking down the main street of the town, and there was this guy that I think he was 17 or 18 at the time, and he had already been to prison on violent felonies multiple times, so much so that the last couple of times he had been tried as an adult. And maybe he's a little bit older, but not much. And he had his switchblade, and was just playing with it, and so I was like, stab me right here, and I pointed to a spot on my body, and that would have allowed me to bleed out in not that long. And he's like, no, we're on the main street, like, people know it's me, and I'm like, I'm not going to say anything, and I'll be dead before anybody gets here to save my life, like, just do it, and I tried to force this person to kill me, and again, I was very angry and depressed and sad that he didn't for a while, just because I was in so much pain. I hurt so much. I was so broken. And, like, I don't want to die. I don't want to kill myself. I haven't in a very long time. But that doesn't mean I was happy for a long time. I told myself I was. And I was happy as I could be, but I wasn't truly happy. And there were other things that happened within a short period of time that I just brushed off. Around that same time, I was working at my job, and the phone rang, and it was a good friend of mine. One of the few friends that I still have from that time in my life, that I still have a connection with. And I didn't have a cell phone, and because this was back in 2007, 2006, something like that. 2007, I think, or early 2008, and so we called the restaurant that I was working at, and I was like, why are you calling? Like, don't call when my boss is here, it's during the day, like, da-da-da-da. And he's like, shut up, like, I called to make sure you're alive. And I'm like, why? And he's like, I'm standing across the street from your apartment watching 10-foot flames shoot out the window. And I was just like, what? And I hung up the phone, and I must have had a look on my face, and my boss, the owner, asked what was wrong, and I told him what my friend had said, and he was like, go. And there was a man in the restaurant, actually the father of the guy that owned that gun, from the first instance from tonight, who was like, I'll take you, because it wasn't that far, but, like, walking would have taken me 10-ish minutes. And so we went outside and jumped in the car, and he brought me down, and I'm just standing there, and I'm staring at these flames. I was on a third floor walk up, um, and my bedroom was all the way in the back, as far away from the fire escape as you could get. And I didn't. If I had been in there, I wouldn't have made it out. Plain and simple. If I hadn't been working that day, I wouldn't have made it out. There's no question about that. The entire floor was engulfed, and if I'd even been able to make it to the fire escape, it was old, it was rusted, and it only went down one floor, so I still would have been 40 feet above the ground. So, at best I would have broken bones. At worst, since it was a cement alley, I would have died from the fall. So either I would have burned to death or died from the trauma of falling, if I'd been able to make it to the window. And the frame of mind I was in at that time, and the types of situations I was putting myself in, I didn't see that as a traumatic event. I didn't see that as a bad thing. I actually saw that as a good thing, because then all of these people that I hated and didn't want to spend time around and annoyed me and all these things wouldn't know where I'd be staying and couldn't find me, and so I found it was refreshing to be homeless again, because I didn't have things tying me down, and for a couple of months I drifted, I stayed here, I stayed there. I think that was about February, so it wasn't too bad, it wasn't too cold for too long. I didn't have to sleep outside more than a few nights. I was really good at infiltrating people's lives and and manipulating them to do what I wanted. I had become very good at that. And so there were only a few nights where I couldn't find a place to stay and had to sleep in a snowbank or in a soccer field or something like that. And they weren't the coldest nights. I knew somebody that was homeless around the same time that wasn't as good at figuring out places to stay, and he actually ended up getting gangrene in one of his feet and had to have all of his toes, I think, removed to save his foot. I don't remember exactly, because this was a long time ago now, over a decade ago. But I wasn't outside that night because it dropped pretty low. I didn't think there was anything wrong with that whole situation at all. That was just my life. That was just my existence. So I just went on. And the last few that I'm going to talk about were relationships, romantic relationships. It was about that time. There were a couple of women that I dated for short periods of time, and pretty close together, and they were around that time. I know I was homeless when I was dating them. I'm just not sure if it was that particular time. I know one of them was, and I'm not sure about the other one. One of them, she was divorced, living with her ex-husband, because neither of them could afford the place on their own. And he worked at the furniture store next door to the restaurant that I worked at. So I knew him. He came in for lunch pretty regularly, all that type of stuff. And she was not well. She had some issues. And in a 3 or 4 weeks that we were together, she came very close to losing me my job. Coming in, I had been sick, and so I didn't go and see her, and like I said before, I didn't have a cell phone, so I had no way to contact her, and so she had apparently been calling my work every day multiple times, like yelling at my coworkers and that type of thing. And when I finally was well enough to come back to work, I was there and I was working, and she came in and just started flipping out, just absolutely flipping out, and I couldn't calm her down. My manager couldn't calm her down. I finally just had to walk outside so she would follow me and continue screaming at me outside, and then told her to leave me alone, and that we were done and don't speak to me again. But prior to that, while we had been together, she drank, but she was also into other stuff, and there were a couple of nights where I kept her from dying. And I didn't see anything wrong with that at all. Sorry about that. Hello? Alright, I'm back. Well, you didn't really notice it, but, yeah, so that one wasn't great. And the next one, I started dating this woman that had a lot of her own trauma. There had actually been abuse, PTSD, all that type of stuff. You'd actually probably recognize her name because it became pretty big when everything came out. And we started dating, and I was still homeless, so I moved into it with her for a bit, and then I started staying with a friend of mine who had offered me to stay at his place with him, and it was good enough, but it was a lot of emotional manipulation and that type of stuff, and she ended up using me to get an apartment in the building that I was staying in with my friend, and then basically as soon as I got him to vouch for her with the landlord to get the place and all that. And as soon as she signed the lease and moved in, done. So that, it broke my heart and broke a lot of trust. So I didn't date anyone for a very long time. There was other stuff going on. I was healing from all of the things that were going on and had been going on for a while. And all that previous trauma, or attempting to, but not doing a really good job of it. So I date anyone or anything like that for about 7 years. Yeah, 6 or 7 years. And I met this woman who lived out west, and when she was in town visiting family, and at the time I was unemployed, and so I had a lot of time, and with a 3-hour time difference, we would have 3, 4, 5, 6 hour conversations every single night, talking about everything, hopes and dreams and deepest fears and all this type of stuff. Like, just very emotionally intimate. Or as emotionally intimate as I could be. And long story short, we did the long distance for a bit, and then she had planned to come and visit some family, and so she was in town for about 10 days, and it was good and it was horrible. She had her own stuff that was going on and all that type of thing, and in that 10 days I think she broke up with me 4 or 5 times, and then got back together with me, and like the final one was we had gone up and spent the weekend at a friend's camp, in the middle of the woods, no cell service, all that, and she left to go and catch her flight. And when I got back to service, there was a voicemail basically berating me and minimizing me and all that, and what we had, and basically saying don't contact me. Broke me up. Because I really cared and really loved this person. And over the next 6 months, maybe a little longer, about every 3-4 weeks, I would get massive emails or Facebook messages, just ripping into me and using all of these deep, dark secrets and vulnerabilities and emotional vulnerability that we had shared, and like twisting it around and misquoting me and like using it as that I was obsessed, and like it wasn't as big or as meaningful to that I was crazy, and like it just gaslighting, and minimizing and emotional manipulation, and just turning all of the things that I had shared with her in confidence around and using them as weapons, and it destroyed me every single time. And eventually, after 6 months, maybe 9 months of this, I couldn't take it anymore, and I was sitting in a truck with a couple of friends of mine, and I was telling them about this, and I had gotten the last toxic message from her a couple of days prior, I was telling them about it and like reading them some of the stuff, and they were just like, "You need to block her," and I hadn't. For a multitude of reasons, but part of it is I hadn't forgiven myself for letting her go. Part of it I felt sorry for. Part of it I wanted to still have communication with her, even if it was sick and toxic. And part of it was probably something else. I don't know exactly. And so I couldn't do it prior. And finally, while I was sitting in there, like I did, like I unblocked her account, all of that. And later that week, maybe a little longer than that, maybe a couple weeks later, I was talking with somebody and they're like, "Did you hear that this person is engaged?" And I heard the name of the person, and it was like, oh, that was the friend that was like always pining after her. And so I started to understand why. She had to separate herself from me and minimize it, and that it wouldn't mean anything to make herself feel better about immediately starting dating this guy, and then within less than a year agreeing to marry him. And it was like literally like engaged, and within like 2 or 3 months, they got married. And it took me a long time to heal from that. I never really did, I don't think. And part of it was I couldn't, I got closure. Don't get me wrong. There was closure that happened. I'll get into that next, but it wasn't a healthy kind of closure. About 2 years later, I think, I found out that she was moving to my city with her husband, and we had pretty similar circles, so I knew I was going to run into her. I wasn't going to take, it was a foregone conclusion. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but I knew it wouldn't be very long, and it didn't take long. And I kind of was like, we kept our distance, but she was just there. And there were a couple times I had conversations with her, or at least, hi, how are you, good, and you, da-da-da-da, type of thing. And as much as she thought she loved this area when she was visiting, it wasn't the same when she was living here. And so after about 6 months or a year, she moved back to her home city with her husband. And maybe 6 months later, I hear that she got a super aggressive form of cancer. And that she was going to die within a couple of months. And not that long after that, I got an email from her. And you know, it was an apology, but because I hadn't really healed from all of the things that she said and did, I never responded. I couldn't. I wasn't in a place that I was able to. And I never got the chance, because she died not that long after. And I never got the chance to tell her that while it wasn't okay, it was okay. I understood why, even if it had hurt me and was continuing to. And the last, big one that I'm going to talk about, you know, there was stuff growing up, and there was stuff, with family, that isn't and wasn't okay. But, I am still in the process of dealing with that in a much more focused way. So maybe that will be a topic for another night down the road. But the last one that I'm going to talk about is the manager at my last job, not the current one. To put it simply, he's a very sick person. To be a little more detailed, he's a narcissistic gaslighter. I worked in this job for 18 months, and I started looking for a new position after about 2 or 3. Loved the people I worked with, decent pay, all that, but everything that he told me about the position, and about the role, and the way he presented himself, and everything in the interview process were lies. And, pretty much there were a few things he did. But basically, if something was I work in IT, so if something was going to get fixed, it was me, and there were many times hundreds of times, where someone would say something to me, I would respond, and tell them the way that it was, or the way it was set up, or it was going to be set up, and all this, and then he would come to me, accusingly, why did you tell this person this, and, completely misrepresent my words, misquote them, or complete fallacy. I don't even know how many hundreds, if not thousands of times that happened. And so I was having to constantly defend my words, defend my actions, all that type of stuff. And he would tell me things, to do things a certain way, and I'd be like, that's not the way you do it. Like, I've worked in IT for, at that point, about 9 years. And, he worked about the same amount of time, but, worked on a networking team in the military, got out, started, was doing a completely, like, similar but unrelated to an IT type of thing, and then he basically started a position. They fired the IT manager, and he was brought into an IT manager position. Like, I know that I wasn't qualified to be in that role, and he definitely wasn't. Like, plain and simple. And if you're watching, okay. And didn't know how to manage people. Would just yell at me across the office when I did something that he didn't like. And I was managing pretty much all of the tickets. Like, I don't know if there were really any tickets that he closed the entire time I was working there. Maybe a couple dozen. Whereas I was closing, I don't know the exact numbers, but probably 50 a week, maybe more, on busy weeks. And there were multiple times where, like, other managers would tell me it was okay to do this or okay to do that, and I would do it that way, and or he would tell me it was okay to do it that way, and then he would get flack about it, and he'd be like, "Why did you do it that way?" And it was like, "You told me it was okay." So it was like, it was constantly questioning, am I going crazy? Like, did I actually say it this way? Did I do it wrong? And just, so at a certain point I realized that he was a gaslighter, like, and just, it clicked. I'm like, that's why this is, I'm not crazy. And so I started doing everything by email or chat, even though my cube and his office were 15 feet apart. I would message him. I didn't even want to talk to him after a certain amount of time. Like, it just disgusted me, having to deal with him at all. And, and just, and there were multiple times where, like, I was told to do things a certain way, for example, there was a situation where a new person was starting, and I was working on fixing a system that generated a significant portion of the income that the company got in a year, and the system was completely down. And that person was starting the following Monday, and I had been working on this issue for 2 or 3 days, and had asked for help multiple times from him, and almost no help. One of the smallest pieces he did, and then just kind of left it to me, which is fine. Like, I get that. Like, I was in a role where I should be doing that, but then I was ordered by him to set up this person's laptop when the system is still down and it generates hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Like, and it's been down for 3 days and isn't up. Mostly there, but it's not up. And God. And then I'm getting yelled at and all that type of stuff. And then I stay late. My shift was from 8 to 4, I think. 9.
Yeah, 8 to 4, I think. And I didn't walk out of there until almost 7 o'clock at night on Friday. Um, and that was only after two different managers. And he walked out of there, like he would come in an hour, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours late, and then leave early, go to the gym, go to the mall on company time, just disappear. Um, and uh, and so he came in late that day, left early. Um, I wasn't even like I could I could ask him if I could head out because I'd been going for 11, 12 hours at that point. Um, I've been working on this issue all and I got it. Mostly resolved, 99% resolved. Um, and I had to wait until Monday to reboot and move the server that was down, and or it was one of the servers that was connected to this system, and I had mostly finished the setup for this new employee, and I was told by two separate managers, go home, it's fine. They've got paperwork and stuff to finish up Monday morning, all that. So you'll have time to do it. Monday morning at 8 o'clock comes, and so before I'm on my way in, and I start getting these accusatory texts like, why isn't this done, da 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 da, and I'm like, well, I have to move the server. It's like, that's not what I'm talking about, da 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 da, like, just very accusatory and all this type of stuff. And then later that day, or the next day, and I got the person taken care of as soon as I got into the office, um, and finish up with this system. I get dragged into one of the other manager's offices and get screamed at by both of them for a half hour. Not screamed at, sternly talked to, about, and having to defend my actions about this setup for this user, and um, and then I get asked to like sign basically a I fucked up letter, and I was like, no, and I wouldn't sign it. And you know or maybe I did, that wasn't that time, that was a different time. But I was seeing the writing on the wall, like they were like whispering in corners and this type of stuff, and so I wrote up a timeline of the entire process, and I emailed it to myself, and I brought it to HR, and I went over the whole thing, and I got it on file, and I signed it, and I got it put into their files, and from that point forward, he knew he didn't have power over me. He knew I wouldn't hesitate going and saying, this guy is fucked up, and the way he does things is not correct, and all this type of stuff. And I think that was the second time I'd gone to HR about some of the stuff that he'd done. And from what I found, I was there for 18 months, and the previous 2 years, he had gone through 4 people in my position. Most of them lasted less than 6 months before they got another job, or just out and out told him to go fuck himself and quit, because of his inability to manage and childish and manipulative behaviors. Like, I hope the best for him. I hope he resolves and fixes whatever is broken in him, so that he can actually have relationships with other humans that aren't based on manipulation and threats. But I don't know that that'll ever happen. But it really messed me up. you know, it was when I finally got the word from my current manager for this job that I'm at now, that he was authorized to offer me the position, I broke down at my desk. I just started crying because, and I realized how much it had really affected me because, I mean, I was mentally and psychologically abused 40 plus hours a week for 18 months. Um, you know, and I don't say that lightly. Like there were days I came home and I just was broken. There were days I called in sick because I physically couldn't get out of bed. The thought of going in, like I just couldn't do it. I physically couldn't do it because of how much this person was abusing me. You know, there is no other word for it. He was psychologically and emotionally abusing me, and um, you know, I almost broke down so many times, so many times. You know, and luckily I had some allies at work. You know, and during this, like the last 10, 11 months that I was, no, not 10, 9 months I was there, so about half the time I was there, maybe a little longer, I was trying to figure out my sexuality, and I was trying to figure out my gender and all this type of stuff. It's like I got all this stuff that's going on up here and here, and I'm like talking to different people, and I'm researching and like doing this soul searching and all this, and then you know, and this is all going on inside. And then from the outside, I'm getting assaulted by this abuse. You know, so it was not an easy period, and there were so many days where if I hadn't had the people I did at work to confide in, I probably would have walked into his office, screamed at him exactly what I thought about him, and walked out. Like for probably about the last 6 months, I would say 3 out of 5 days of the week I was right there, like right on the edge. I was at the breaking point. I couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't take it anymore. And, you know, like, just couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't, I know I'm repeating myself, but I just couldn't take it anymore. And I just don't know how people are like that. Like, and this wasn't, like, he wasn't even physically abusive or, like, in a romantic relationship. Like, I can't even imagine this guy in, like, in a romantic relationship with someone. Like, how? Or, like, that's speculation, but, like, and, like, you know, from other relationships that I've had and friends that I've had where they told me about like being in relationships with people like him. Just how do people get so broken that like that becomes their norm and that becomes acceptable? Like, it's really, really sad. Both for the people that have to deal and live with these people, but also for those themselves. Like, who hurt you and how did they hurt you? And I don't know. Well, this is at least the conclusion, quote unquote, of the traumatic events that I wanted to talk about. So I think it's about time for me to end this video, and I will hopefully talk about something a tad bit lighter in my next few videos. There may be more stuff that surfaces, especially because talking about all this stuff has made me realize, that there's still some unresolved things with that, and as well as things that I didn't talk about, that I should probably bring up in therapy and get to the bottom of the root and work and look at those. So, so there may be more things that come up, but so going forward, for a bit at least, I think be a little lighter, a little more airy, a little less trigger and trauma inducing for both you and me. So with that, I will just say good night. And again, my name is Justice Dazzle. Real, raw, and unfiltered.